It's that time again. Oh, yes, it's time for another leader tier list going into the pre-release weekend for a new expansion of Star Wars Unlimited. This time around, it's jumped to Lightspeed. That's right, we're doing a lot of stuff with vehicles, mostly ships in the space arena, but don't forget there will be vehicles in the ground arena as well. So a lot to talk about with this one. This is going to be a really interesting one because the whole pilot mechanic throws a lot of complexity into how you look at leaders, because you have all these cards now that can be played as pilot upgrades on vehicles, but also as ground units. And so deciding what you're going to put into your pre-release is going to be really, really interesting. So the Ice Cave Radio episode is already out, where Charmer and I go ahead and put together our pre-release kit. We ended up playing a Green Vader with Cunning in that one, but I wanted to go through and once again tell you my opinions, at least, on what leaders you're going to want to look for in your pre-release kit, what they're going to be good at, and how much success you can kind of in general expect from them. This isn't a definitive it has to absolutely be this way list, but we're going to break it down and hopefully give you some good information to keep in mind as you go into your pre-releases. So first up, Assajj Ventress. We're kind of just going to go through this in order. I believe it's just going to go, leaders 1 through 18. So we're starting in Vigilance. Now, Assajj, I think is being a little bit underrated right now, frankly. I think deal 1 damage to your friendly unit, if you do deal 1 damage to an enemy unit in the same arena, is a great ability, both in Premiere, where you can really construct a deck around this, specifically with the grit keyword, but also just in Limited, it's going to be good too, because it's, of course, and everything I say, you're going to hear me say this a ton of times during this video, it's dependent on the cards you get in your pool, right? But if you do get a good amount in Vigilance that has a little bit higher health, they usually do. If you find some other stuff that works out for it, a little bit of grit here and there, I think Assajj could work really nicely. Just being able to do 1 damage to an enemy unit in the same arena, kind of at will, with no cost associated to it, no resource cost is what I'm saying, I think is going to be really good. Let's take a look at her leader side. So she has grit on the ground as a 4/6, so don't forget you can always deploy her Zat. But then as a pilot, attached unit is a leader unit. That's usually the case. And then that unit gains grit, and on attack you may deal 1 damage to a friendly unit. If you do, deal 1 damage to an enemy unit in the same arena. So has the same ability again, this time it's on attack, but that ship also gets grit as well. It just says 1 damage to a friendly unit, so she can do a damage to herself as well, to the unit that she's on. So this is sort of a way to just power up your unit, right? You attack, you do damage to yourself, suddenly she's a +4, right? So this is pretty strong. You can think of her as sort of a 4/3 more than a 3/4 in a lot of cases. But again, going back to this leader side ability, I think there's going to be a lot of times where 1 damage on your unit is fine if it equals a positive trade with your opponent's side of the board. And I think you're going to be able to find those opportunities pretty frequently. So I'm actually going to go ahead and put her in. Oh my gosh, I clicked on this thing instead of the actual website. Hold on, let's go to the other window. There you go. I think we're going to put her in A. So not necessarily S tier, but I think you will find success with Assajj, again, with the right card pool and the right sort of mindset with how to use her. Let's move on to Grand Admiral Thrawn. This is a leader I'm extremely excited about, but if you think about it in a limited sense in pre-release, especially where we're dealing with a sealed pool, in draft I think he can be a little bit better because you can really zero in on those when defeateds, but for pre-release where you just get 6 booster packs and that's it, you're going to really have to have a specific pool of cards to make this work. It is a really strong ability if you can make it work. Obviously, getting double the effect from a when defeated is pretty big. He gets that on his leader side as well. When you use a when defeated ability, you may use that ability again. Use this once per round. 4/7 on the ground, So I think he's strong, but I don't think he's going to be the strongest leader in pre-release specifically. And in draft, again, you're going to really need to be able to draft a specific thing, and kind of picking Thrawn early on and just kind of like tunneling on it is a risky strategy in draft. So I think in Limited, he has a potentially high ceiling, but a pretty realistically, I would say realistically, he's going to be very average, So I'm actually going to go ahead and put him in B. I would be tempted to put him a little bit lower in C just because, again, I think it's going to be not too frequently where you're going to get a lot of use out of his ability, but that said, there are going to be those cases where you just get the perfect card pool or the perfect draft, and he's going to be amazing, right? So we'll put him in B for now. Lando Calrissian. Okay, so Lando is Vigilance, Heroism, Action, pay 1 and exhaust. Play a unit from your hand, paying its cost. If you do and control a ground unit and a space unit, give a shield token to a unit. So you don't need to give the shield unit or the shield token to the unit you're playing. Keep that in mind, first of all. But you do need to have a ground unit and a space unit. So again, this is kind of pool dependent. I think you can sort of tool your deck in terms of, hey, maybe I do play those pilot upgrades on the ground, and then, if I have a space unit, maybe do that. Maybe the shield is more valuable than the pilot stats. So I think with the right deck pilot, we'll say, in this case, he could be decent. Shield tokens are always annoying. That said, to me, I think this is a little bit too much in terms of hoops to jump through to make him effective, right? He's going to be a 5/7 Sentinel on the ground, or you can attach him as a 5/5 upgrade to a ship, and he says, when deployed as an upgrade, you may give a shield token to a unit in a different arena. So that, again, is just another hoop to sort of jump through, right? He can't give himself a shield, right? Because when deployed as an upgrade, you may give a shield token to a unit in a different arena. So right there, you can't give the shield to whatever he goes on, which I think reduces his power quite a bit. And then, if you want to give a shield to something in the air, that means you have to attach him to a vehicle on the ground, which we do have some in this set, but not as many as there are in space. So I think it's going to be hard to put a shield on something in space, which in limited is where you're going to want it, I think, in this set. So to me, he's another leader that, like, again, if the stars align, he can be strong, but I see him as kind of a B tier leader as well. All right, moving on to Rose Tico. So while I don't think this ability is going to be terribly strong in Premiere, I do think Rose could be a pretty solid, just basic leader to keep in mind for Limited, for both draft and for your sealed pool, right? If you do just have like tons and tons of vehicles, not as many pilots, you have like a lot of heroism stuff, I don't think she would be that bad, right? Heal 2 damage from a vehicle, the unit that attacked this phase. So there is that caveat too, right? Where you need to have attacked on her leader side. It's a little bit different. She has on attack, you may heal 2 damage from a vehicle unit. That's maybe a little bit more useful, but it's tough to say. It is sort of circumstantial. I'm tempted to kind of put her in A, honestly, because I do think healing 2 is a strong ability in Star Wars Unlimited. That said, where you have to do it on a vehicle that you have attacked with, that opens the door a lot of times to you attack with a vehicle and you trade with another unit on their side. Your vehicle is damaged. It's easier for them to take out. So I'm worried that we're going to get into situations where she's not going to really get to use the ability that much. Then again, if you're smart about your trades, I could see this being incredibly useful, right? On the leader side as well, she's a 4/6 on 5, flips on 5. That's not too bad. Just a 4/6 body is okay. I'm hesitant to put her in A, but I think I would probably put her at the top of B. Maybe even the bottom of A. Yeah, I think I'll put her at the bottom of A because I do think she's better than people think. I don't think she's going to be. I think she's going to end up being a little bit lower overall on the tier list. I might move her down to B a little bit later, but I think for now, I think we can put her on the bottom of A. I don't think she's a leader that should be underestimated. That heal can be strong. Now, Admiral Piett. This is going to be an interesting one because it's capital ship centric. Okay, so I just looked it up to be clear, and there are 11 non-heroic capital ships in the set. So obviously you can include a couple capital ships with heroism as well, but that's going to just make it cost more. That said, his leader ability of play a capital ship unit from your hand, it costs 1 less, that does cover potentially half of the aspect penalty if you have, command or whatever else, and heroism is the only off aspect. So I think heroism ships are on the menu potentially for a Piett deck. That said, I think the tricky part is that, capital ships are obviously more on the expensive side. The cheapest one we've got in the set is, looks like 5 costs are the cheapest set it gets. You've got things like the Dakar cargo frigate, and that's heroism as well. Corvus is in there, but that's a rare, so you can't count on seeing a lot of that. I think if you do have a good amount of capital ships, and let's take a look at his leader ability. Each capital ship unit you play costs 2 less, so that's that's a little bit better. He's a 2/7, so he's a little bit more durable when he flips. So if you end up seeing a lot of capital ships in your sealed pool and you have him and you don't have to do a lot of stuff off aspect, I think he can be strong. I think the other thing to think about is that a lot of these capital ships are legendaries, so it's really unlikely that you're going to see a lot of them. So, again, I think in the right scenario, he can be strong, but I think in general, you're probably not going to find the sealed pool or the draft pool for that matter to really make him work. I think he's a very, very exciting leader when you think about Premier and constructed play, and there I would rate him higher. But for the sake of limited, I think we're going to have to put him in B. It feels bad. In fact, I'm going to have to put him in C because I think it's even less likely that you're going to find a pool that makes Piett work in limited than it is Thrawn or even Lando, really. And Lando, I feel like I should put ahead of Thrawn now that I think about it. Just because that's something that you have more control over, ground and space arena stuff, whereas Thrawn, you just kind of need that keyword to appear in your sealed pool or in your draft. So, yeah, Piett needing capital ships. The fact that, while you're waiting to play your capital ships, you're going to be hit by other things early on. Now, you can build a Piett deck in theory for limited or for draft that does have some strong early stuff and just sort of ignores his leader ability and uses it to play your bombs a little bit early. I could see that being a thing, but I think if you're going to be building a deck like that, you're probably going to look at your leader pool and say, well, I probably have a better leader to play than Piett because I don't want to just not have a leader ability for the first half of the game, So I love this leader, but I don't think he's going to be that great in limited. So we're going to put him in C. Sorry, Piett. We're gonna force choke you out of this tier list for now. All right. Darth Vader. Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, I think this leader could be really, really good in limited. Let's read it. So, action exhaust. If you attacked with a non-token vehicle unit this phase, create a TIE fighter token. On the flip side, he's a 5/5 upgrade that creates 2 TIE fighter tokens. And then he's a 5/6 on the ground. So, not super inspiring on the ground, right? Flips on 6, 5/6. Probably don't want to do that. But you really, really want to prioritize having a ship to put him on, both because he gives it +5/+5, and the fact that he creates 2 TIE Fighter tokens as well is just great. And the reason why I'm so excited about TIE Fighter tokens is that anything that makes more units on your board for your opponent to have to deal with, especially in a limited environment, is very strong. Add to the fact that these are tokens that you can then put pilots on too and make them even stronger. I think that's good as well. You're going to want to use them as an upgrade because that's the only time you get the TIE Fighter tokens, right? You don't get those if you play them, if you flip on the ground, as you can see here. But again, just to have a steady supply of things to put pilots on, of little bits of damage that you can poke in and annoy your opponent with, are really, really good. And I think he makes tokens easier than some of the other leaders we've seen in the past, right? Like if we think about Newt Gunray or something like that. This is a little bit easier to make that token thing happen in a limited environment because there's no aspect requirement, there's no cost, resource cost associated. You just have to have a vehicle and have attacked with it, which I think is a very, very easy thing to happen. It is non-token vehicle, of course, as tokens can't make more tokens. But if presumably you're going to have a good amount of inexpensive, like the deck we built on the episode, right? This deck right here. It's got a lot of low cost vehicles, right? First Order TIE Fighter. We've got the Kijimi Patrollers, Scouting Headhunter, TIE Bomber. There's a good amount of stuff in there that can get this rolling right away. And so for that reason, I'm going to put him in S because I think there's a lot of stuff that's strong in command. I think you can pair him very easily with yellow or red. And there's a lot of good stuff in there as well on the villainy side and the strength of things. And then again, one of the easiest hero abilities, I think, to activate, and then he is also very strong when he flips too, is +5/+5 and 2 more tokens is a crazy strong flip turn, right? So I think he's in good shape for this. I think he's our first, in my opinion, S tier leader that you're really going to want to look for. Moving on to Admiral Holdo. Now, this is going to be an interesting one to think about. Action, pay 1. and exhaust. Give a resistance unit or a unit with resistance upgrade on it +2/+2 for this phase. So let me go back and just look at my resistance trait here. Let's see. I'm looking at, I'm using the official website, which I think is very good for finding this kind of thing. And so in set 4, there's a good amount of resistance stuff, because remember, it can be just resistance unit or a unit with a resistance upgrade on it. So it's specifically talking about resistance pilots. So this is going to be very card pool dependent, rather. But if you do have the card pool, just being able to pay 1 to give something +2/+2 for the phase is so strong. As someone who just top forward a showdown with a Wat Tambor list, being able to give something +2/+2 really messes with your opponent's trading math, and so being able to do that without having a unit die is kind of nice. One resource I think is pretty good to pay for that. That said, while I think her ability is strong, and if you look at her flip side, it's basically the same thing. It's just on attack. If we think about it, although the ability is strong, I think it's going to again require a very specific card pool. You're going to need to have her, and you're going to need to have a lot of resistance stuff. And then you're going to need to be able to play it in a way where you're going to be able to buff that resistance stuff, right? So while I think her ability is strong, and maybe there's a good constructed deck in there, a good premier deck in there, I think, again, she's going to be so card pool dependent that we have to put her in B. B is the place, I think, for a lot of leaders that are circumstantially strong but require specific card pools. Whereas I think A is sort of more of an overall strong leader, and S is just, they're very flexible as far as what card pool works with them. So let's move on here. Wedge Antilles. All right, play a card from your hand using piloting. It costs 1 less. That's pretty good. On his flip side, he's a 3/6 on the ground. Meh. But as a pilot, attaching his leader unit, it gains on attack. The next pilot card you play this phase costs 1 less. There you go. So makes pilots cheaper, right? Specifically when you play them as pilot upgrades, because you're using that piloting keyword, So you can't play a pilot unit on the ground and get a discount on it, right? It has to be using the piloting keyword, aka playing it as an upgrade on a vehicle. So again, I think this is one where I feel like it is going to be easier to build a deck around him for limited, just because the whole set is kind of all about piloting. You're going to be pulling a lot of pilots regardless. So if you've got a lot of stuff on the non-heroism villainy or on the heroism side, you're going to be in pretty good shape here, right? Because he's fairly generous when it comes to what works with him. All you need is that pilot keyword. So I think I'm going to go ahead and put him in A here. In fact, I'm going to put him above Rose. I don't think he's quite as strong as Assajj, but I think he's going to be stronger than Rose, again, in that lower cost stuff is always going to be good. It's always nice to have that extra resource lying around. And with the amount of pilots we see in the set, it's not going to be difficult, I think, to find a good card pool for him. So I think he's going to be pretty strong overall. Boba Fett. Okay, so keep in mind with sealed specifically, you're going to get this leader and you're going to get the Han Solo leader in your pre-release kit. You're going to get the borderless hyperspace versions of those. So, ooh, pretty. And they're both fun build-around leaders, right? Those are both the leaders from the Spotlight decks, but you're going to always have access to them for pre-release. So we'll keep that in mind as we talk about this too. I think his ability is pretty good. When you deal non-combat damage, you may exhaust this leader. If you do deal 1 indirect damage to a player, all right. Again, non-combat damage is any damage source that doesn't come from a unit running into another unit, right? That's combat damage. So non-combat damage is something that says maybe on attack, deal 2 damage to a unit. That 2 damage is non-combat damage, right? Because although it's activated by attacking, it is not damage resulting from a unit running into another unit. That's what you got to keep in mind. So all that kind of damage is fair game here. On the flip side, 4/7 on the ground, but as a pilot, attached unit is a leader unit, as usual. And then when deployed as an upgrade, deal up to 4 damage divided as you choose among any number of units. So as long as you can put him on a vehicle, you kind of get a mini overwhelming barrage when you flip this leader. So I think right there, that makes this leader pretty strong. +4/+4 is good, right? But just getting that little 4 damage to kind of put wherever you want on their units is a good flip turn. That can be very game changing in a limited environment. So I think he does have very strong flip ability. His leader side is more circumstantial, right? If you don't end up with a card pool that does a lot of non-combat damage, then I don't think he's going to be that great. You don't really want to play him if his leader side is essentially blank, even though his flip side is good. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that you really do want to have a pool that works around his leader side ability. That said, I think even if you don't have the greatest pool around his leader side ability, and you don't necessarily have anything that works great with another villainy leader, but you feel kind of pushed into villainy, which can happen, I think he's a good sort of safety leader to have access to, because his flip is always going to be good as long as you can put him on a vehicle. You're always going to get that. It's always going to be strong. And his leader side, even if it doesn't activate all that much, it's not the end of the world, if you've still got a decent deck and there's no other leaders that really fit. So I think he's a great safety leader in that regard. I'm going to put him at the bottom of A, just because, again, I think he does require more of a specific pool for his leader side, but his unit side, or his pilot upgrade side, you could say, is so strong that I think he's worth considering, again, even if you have a little bit weaker pool for him. So we're going to put him at the bottom of A. All right, Captain Phasma, our next aggression leader. Action, exhaust. If you played a first order card this phase, deal 1 damage to a base. So I think one trend with this expansion that we're going to have to keep in mind is that a lot of leaders in draft, and especially in sealed, are going to require a little bit more specific card pools than we're used to as far as traits go, right? We've seen stuff that works with resistance, stuff that works with when defeated, keywords as well I'm including in this, and now we have first orders. So if you have a lot of first order cards, and a lot of them are going to be in red, then yeah, I think Captain Phasma can be very strong, right? If you played a first order card, deal 1 damage to a base, that's great. Everybody likes the Sabine ability, doing damage to bases, and it's even better when you don't have to do it to yourself, right? Flips on 4, or 5 rather, flips on 5, had Sabine on the brain. 4, 6, not too bad stats-wise. It says, on attack, if you played another first-order card this phase, you may deal 1 damage to a unit. If you do, deal 1 damage to a base. So, gives you the damage on the unit a little bit there, too. I think I think it's worded a little bit weirdly, right? Where it says, if you played another first-order card this phase, it's basically telling you that, like, she doesn't count because, again, leaders are not played. They are deployed, so you'd have to still have played another first order card somewhere in the turn, either pre-flip or post-flip before her attack for this to work. That said, free damage is always great. A strong body on the ground could kind of surprise some opponents, right? Because if everyone's focusing on space, because that's where a lot of the units are focused this time around, a 4/6 on the ground, could end up making kind of a difference. So I think, again, if you have the right pool, if you get a bunch of first order stuff and you get her, she's worth running. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to make her work. She's not really going to do a lot for you. So I think she's going to go in B. Again, this is kind of for the tier of leaders that can potentially be good, but require very, very specific pools that you are unlikely to see. It's unlikely that you're going to get a bunch of first order stuff in your pre-release, enough to make running Captain Phasma worth it. It's possible, but it's less likely than getting something that a more generic leader will work better with. So, for instance, if you have, I think it's more likely to get a pool that works with Boba Fett or with Darth Vader than Phasma. Moving on to Major Vonreg. Okay. Action, exhaust. Play a vehicle unit from your hand, paying its cost. If you do, give another unit +1/+0 for this phase. Good generic ability. Moving on. Forget the ground stuff. EZIP 2/5. Flips on 4, by the way, which is also kind of cool for limited as well. Attached unit is a leader unit. It gains on attack. You may give another unit in this arena +1/+0 for this phase. So there's a little bit of a hoop to jump through where it's another unit. It's not himself, and it has to be in the same arena. So, I think you're still going to get it fairly often, but you do have to have another unit with him in that arena for it to work. +3/+3 on a vehicle too, so not bad. So I think this is going to be a pretty decent limited leader, though. Again, there's going to be tons and tons of vehicles. That's kind of the idea with the set. So you're going to get this ability to activate. +1 is always nice. Does he do the +1 thing as well as like Boba 2 did in set 2? No, I don't think so. I don't think he's going to be the greatest premier leader, but I think in limited, again, if you have the right pool, if you're really pushing to villainy and he's kind of, your only option, he can work with a pretty wide variety of card pools. So we're going to go ahead and put him in the bottom of A. Again, because I think he's going to be more generically good. I don't think he's necessarily going to be as good as any of these other leaders that I have ahead of him in A, but I do think he's good enough and good enough in a generic sense that you'll have some success with him if you run him. All right, moving on to Luke Skywalker. Okay. Heroism, aggression, action, exhaust. If you attacked with a fighter unit this phase, deal 1 damage to a unit. And let's go through and, again, go to our handy-dandy filter here over on the official website and just look up fighter for this set and see what's in there. Because I believe there are a lot of fighter cards here. And there are indeed. There's tons. There's tons of fighters in set 4. So while some of those fighters are going to be villainy, obviously, and those would be taken out of the list, I mean, you've got what? Like 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Yeah, it looks like 41 total cards that have the fighter trait. And then, of course, you're going to minus, 3, maybe about 10 of those with villainy. So still a pretty good pool. So I think it's fairly likely that if you pull Luke, you're going to have enough fighters to make this ability work. What do we got on the leader side? He's got the interesting ability of this upgrade can't be defeated by enemy card abilities. That's pretty good. There isn't honestly a ton of upgrade removal in Jump to Lightspeed, so I don't think you're going to need to worry about this a lot, I know that's the big concern for people in Premiere is, oh, my leaders are just going to be deleted by Confiscate or whatever, but in Limited, I don't think you're going to need to be as concerned about it, but it's nice that he has this ability anyway. He also has attached unit is a leader unit, and then if it's a fighter, it gains on attack, you may deal 3 damage to a unit. So that right there is a strong ability. He also gives +4, +5, so he gives great stats. Flips on 6, so it's a little bit later, but still good stats. And then, again, like with his leader ability, just being able to deal 1 damage to a unit is strong. Like that's good. That 1 damage, again, like 1 damage is a big deal in Star Wars Unlimited. So being able to have a leader that just does that with a very easy activation, like attacking with a fighter, I think is good, right? So I feel like he's going to be strong. He's definitely an A to me. I value damage a little bit more than cost reduction, like with Wedge. So I'm going to put him right up there with Assajj. I'm tempted to put him right under Assajj, actually. Yeah. I think he's a little bit better than Assajj because it's just a little bit less risk on your part, per se. I don't know. It's really interchangeable between these two because Assajj's 1 damage is just kind of like at will, right? Because it's pretty likely you'll be able to do 1 damage to one of your units without worrying a ton about it. But yeah, maybe I think Assajj is a little bit better than Luke. All right, we'll put Luke there. Either way, it's like apples to oranges, right? I mean, they're both going to, I think, have about the same success rate. I think Luke, though, is going to be definitely a leader you're going to want to look out for if you have a pool that has a lot of heroism stuff, a lot of aggression stuff, and a lot of fighters. But again, finding a lot of fighters I don't think is going to be too hard in this set. Looking at the numbers anyway. Moving on to Poe Dameron. All right. One of the rare leaders, so you're going to see him a little bit less often. But that said, I think he's an extremely, extremely strong leader if played well. Action, pay 1 and exhaust. Flip this leader and attach him as an upgrade to a friendly vehicle unit without a pilot on it. So he can actually be put out there without using the epic action. So we'll get into the epic action in a moment. But let's look at his leader side. So you pay 1 to put him on a vehicle, right? So he becomes a +2/+1. Not a ton of stats, but being able to pay 1 to just give something +2/+1 is pretty great. And then he also has the ability of attach this unit, pay 1. Notice this is action without the exhaust symbol, so you can play this even if a unit is exhausted. So you put him on something as an upgrade, you attack with it, then you can use his ability on this side and pay 1, attach this upgrade to a friendly vehicle unit without a pilot on it, use this ability only once each round. So you can play him on a vehicle, attack with that vehicle, then pay 1 to move him to another vehicle that you might have that hasn't attacked yet, attack with that vehicle. So in theory, if the board state is right and you can keep multiple vehicles ready and waiting and not dead, he can add 4 damage per turn going your opponent's way. So huge upside with this leader. Now, looking at his epic action, if you control 5 or more resources, deploy this leader as a unit. So you can deploy him as a 4/6 on the ground. That's fine. I think it's really actually awesome that you can deploy him on the ground like that, like normal, you know. Because the thing is when he gets defeated as a ground unit, sure, you lose the epic action, but you can still use his regular leader side action. So that 2/1 upgrade can keep coming out, you know. So you play him on the ground, you're a beefy 4/6 that it's annoying for your opponent to deal with. They deal with it, and then he's just coming back again as an upgrade, right? So I think he's extremely strong. I think, again, you're going to need to play well, right? You're going to need to play in a way that ideally keeps vehicles available for him to jump onto, you know? One thing to think about, too, is that, say you have a vehicle that is exhausted. Say you played a vehicle, right? It comes into play exhausted, but it's in danger of being traded into by something else. You can maybe put Poe on there so it makes the trade less appealing to your opponent too. So he can be sort of a protective measure to either make your opponent not want to attack into a unit that they would have attacked into otherwise, or make sure that if they do attack into it, you're getting more value back from it. So he's got such a great amount of versatility. I think he's going to be an absolutely fantastic premier leader, but I think he is a pretty much equally fantastic limited leader as well. So we're going to put him right up in S. I'm going to put him at the top of S. I think Poe Dameron is the best leader in the set, hands down. I think in my mind, it's pretty easy. I know a lot of people are excited about Kazuda, and we're going to talk about him later, but I think Poe's the best leader in the set. Top S for me for sure. Moving on to Admiral Trench. All right, into the cunning stuff now. Discard a card, action exhaust. Discard a card that costs 3 or more from your hand if you do draw a card. Okay, cool. Really interesting in that he does not have an epic action. He has an action. Pay 3 exhaust. If you control 6 or more resources, deploy this leader. So he can come out as a 4/5 for 3, which is pretty cool because, again, he comes into play ready because he's being deployed via the epic action. He's not just being played. And then it says, when deployed, reveal the top 4 cards of your deck. An opponent discards 2 of them, draw 1 of the remaining cards, and discard the others. So you're going to essentially mill yourself for 3 and get 1 card in hand is the end result of this, right? So this is a very, very dangerous ability in limited because we're talking about 30 card decks. So you're going to be losing almost a 1/6 of your deck, right? If you're running 30 cards with this. So it's risky. That said, getting to pay 3 for a 4/5 that is ready potentially multiple times in a game is really, really strong. So I think, you know, if we just ignore his leader ability completely and just on resource turn 3, you start like throwing him out there, I think he's going to be really annoying for your opponent to deal with. Now, this is going to potentially pressure them a lot in the ground arena. So you're going to want to make sure that you have enough space stuff to keep yourself safe on that side of things. And you're going to want to make sure you have a deck that's a little bit lower to the ground and can end the game quickly. Because again, the longer the game goes, the more chances you're going to just run out of steam and deck yourself, right? But I think there's a scenario where Trench could actually be pretty strong in limited and premier. And, you know, more than anything, it doesn't matter at all what your card pool is as far as like traits go or keywords. He doesn't interact with any of that stuff aside from just card cost, right? So I think the fact that you can discard a card that costs 3 or more and draw 1. He has a nice hand filtering mechanic in his kit too, so you can use that to make sure you are more likely to have the cards. And so, you know, maybe if you find a bit of recursion as well, ways to bring stuff back from your discard pile, that's great. But I think he may be a little bit underrated. I've got a feeling he's going to be kind of strong and limited if he's played well. I think it's going to be very easy to run yourself out of cards and just lose the game. But I think he could be good. I think there's potential with Trench in limited. So I'm going to put him right in the middle of A because I think he is more usable at will, like he has less requirements, right? Than these 3 here. You can just kind of use him, and if he's played well, he's going to be very strong. I don't think he requires a very specific card pool to work well. I think cost reduction on Wedge is really good. I think the damage from Luke and Assajj is better. But I think he's A tier. I really do. I think if you have him, you should really consider playing him. That 4/5 on the ground for 3 that comes in ready, that's super strong, right? Imagine if you had like any other card that was just like cost 3, 4/5. This comes into play ready. Everyone would be like, "Holy crap, that's incredibly strong," right? So that's what this is. Discard stuff aside. So again, I think based on your deck, based on the state of the game, I think he could be really good. So at least it's hand filtering. I think he's A. That's my hot take for this one, I think. Trench is A tier. All right, Rio Durant. Action, pay 1, he's a villainy cunning again. Pay 1, exhausts, attack with a space unit. It gets +1/+0 and gains Saboteur for this attack. Wow, that's really, really good. Giving something Saboteur and +1 for 1 is great, right? Space unit specific, but that's fine because we got a ton of space units in this set. Really, really great ability. All right. As a unit, he's a 3/5 with Saboteur on epic action, whatever. As a pilot, he's +3/+5. That's a lot of health. That's pretty good. Attached unit as a leader unit against Saboteur. That's really good. If it's a transport, it also gets +1/+0. So, there are, a decent amount of transports in this set. Let's go again to the website here. I've got to open on my other screen. How many transports do we have? Wow, tons. More than I thought, actually. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 27 transports in Jump to Lightspeed. Now, obviously, some of those are heroism. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. So, actually, he will work with nearly every transport, all but 5, and if you don't want to pay the aspect penalty. So, I think, I think Rio Durant's pretty solid. I mean, there's enough transports in there to make his leader side, max out. But again, going back to his unit side max out is what I meant to say. His leader side though is so good that if you've got a ton of good space stuff, if you've got a good resource curve of low cost to high cost space stuff, I think he's incredibly strong. Right, being able to get through shields, being able to get through Sentinel. He seems really, really good. I think he might be outclassed in Premier, but we're not talking about Premier right now. We're talking about Limited, and I think he's going to be really strong. Just having an ability that's very easy to activate and very useful once you do. I'm going to put him... I really like that 1 damage on units. That said, if you just want to hit base and be aggressive, which is not bad, or if you just simply want to have +1, for 1... He does cost 1. Let's put him... Oh, it's a tough choice. I think these 3 are all feeling fairly even to me. I might even move him to the bottom of S. Man, is he S? Is he S tier? If you didn't have to pay 1, he'd be S tier, I think. And I think I'm glad that you have to pay 1 because he would be insanely strong otherwise. Yeah, the 1 cost keeps him in A. And I think we're going to put him 3rd. Yeah, I'm not so sure on that. He's definitely to the top of A tier. One of the best, I think, limited leaders if you're in villainy and cunning. But yeah, really, really good. All right, we'll put him in A. That's fine. All right, moving on to Admiral Ackbar. This one's interesting to talk about. Cunning and Heroism, action, pay 1, exhausts a non-leader unit. If you do, its controller creates an X-Wing token. So you've essentially got access all the time to an event that says pay 1, exhaust a unit. It just says that, right? Which is strong. You don't really want to give your opponent a ton of 2/2 tokens. That said, it might be better to do that than either lose a crucial unit from an attack on their side or lose the game or take a lot of damage, right? They buff something, you just exhaust it, they lose whatever they use to buff it, etc., etc. But I think we have to look at it on the other side too, and we'll get to that in a second. On the flip, he's a 3/8, which is a ton of health, and then on attack you may exhaust a unit. If you do, its controller creates an X-Wing token. There you go. So same thing, but just on attack this time, and doesn't cost anything. So here's my take on it. I think I'm not sure if you would have the time to do this in Limited. I think he's going to be extremely strong in Premier, where you can basically start a chain of using your X-Wing tokens to make more X-Wing tokens, right? You exhaust some unit on your side, that's fine. In this scenario, you'd be playing like Cunning Vigilance, and you'd be playing kind of a control list anyway, so you've got the time, you know? And then your X-Wings start making more X-Wings. Don't underestimate the annoyance of having to deal with a 2/2 unit for your opponent. That is a huge annoyance to deal with, especially when you consider those units can have pilots then placed on them. So I think what you're really going to want to do is find a scenario where you can play more defensively with Ackbar and start a chain where your tokens make more tokens, especially in limited. That's going to get very, very oppressive for your opponent to have to deal with. So I think he could potentially be very good in limited, but you're going to need to have a safer, slower card pool. You're going to need Sentinels. You're going to need removal. You're going to really want to be looking at, I think, blue with Ackbar here, because that's where a lot of that stuff is going to be. But if you can find the right card pool, I think he's going to be very, very strong. I would like to put him at, I'd like to put him in A, because again, he doesn't really require any specific card pool. He just requires a specific style of play, and your card pool is what kind of enables that type of play, which again, if you have a more defensive card pool, Sentinels, healing, bounce, removal, if you get a lot of that, then I think you can really make Ackbar work. And I don't think it would be that hard to sort of construct something that works that way. So I think to me, he's A tier. I think we're going to put him at the bottom of A, although I will say I think he has the potential to be near the top of A. I think we may see it play out in pre-release weekend where people are just crushing with him. I would not be surprised at all to see that. I'm kind of tempted to, you know what? We're going to put him here. We're going to put him in the middle of A. In fact, we're going to put him right under Wedge, I think. Yeah. Because cost reduction is good, but being able to just keep making tokens in a limited sense, limited environment where your card pool is very limited, right? I think it's good. So Ackbar goes right in the middle of A. I will say, I would not be surprised at all if this coming weekend people are like, oh, Ackbar is just OP, you won everything, you know? I think he's a strong leader, but I think you need to think of him in a little bit different scenario than it appears you should think of him on first glance, right? You have to think about what you can really do with this leader. All right, moving on to Han Solo, Never Tell Me the Odds. So this is our other spotlight leader. This is the other leader that you will always have access to because you're going to get the hyperspace version in your pre-release kit. Let's read his ability, though, in case you're unfamiliar with it. Action, exhaust on the leader side, reveal the top card of your deck, then attack with a unit. If the revealed card and that unit have different costs, that unit gets +1/+0 for this attack. So that's a lot of text, but let's break it down. First of all, you're going to have a pool that has a lot of odd cards in it. You can have some evens in there, but you're going to have mostly odd cards. So that's kind of a giant hoop to jump through right away. You know, I think he's definitely a better builder on leader than a limited leader. We'll get that out of the way. But his ability is fairly versatile, right? Because you reveal the card first. So you reveal the card and take a look at it, right? Then you choose to attack with a unit. You know, you attack with a unit, but you can choose which one it is. So if you have multiple units out there, and one of the units matches that cost and the other doesn't, you get a chance to make sure you're attacking with the correct unit to capitalize on it and get that +1. You know, it's always really nice to be able to just look at the top card of your deck as well, just to, know what's coming next. Now, it does say reveal, so your opponent's going to see that too, but at the same time, it is kind of nice to kind of like know what's up, That said, let's look at his leader side. He's a 3/7 on the ground. Otherwise, he's a 3/4 pilot upgrade. And then for each friendly unit or upgrade that has an odd cost, ready a resource. So he does have potentially a big flip, right? It's again it's a bigger hoop to jump through than the Boba leader, for instance, that just does damage. In this, you need a little bit of setup, and you need to have the right card pool for that setup because again, it's very odd cost focused. So I think he can be strong, but I think it's less likely again that you're going to find the card pool to really make him pop off. So we're going to put him in B. I think he's better than like the trait specific stuff, So I'm going to put him near the top of B because I think it's going to be easier to find a bunch of stuff with odd costs than it is to find specific keywords or specific traits, right? So I think he's B. You're probably not going to want to play him, but you should definitely keep him in mind because you're always going to have access to him. And if your card pool supports it, I think he can be fairly strong because getting to ready resource, getting to play potentially an extra unit or an extra pilot is going to be good. So keep him in mind at least. Really fun leader in Premiere, by the way. I think he's awesome there. Kazuda Zono. So our pilot from the Resistance TV show. This is the one that everybody's been talking about. Very exciting ability. A friendly action exhaust. A friendly unit loses all abilities for this round. Take an extra action after this one. So essentially you can just blank the card text of a unit, on your side, a friendly unit, So this is a really good way to get rid of a lot of negative effects. I think he's very exciting in a constructed Premiere sense where you can really build a deck around this. In Limited, though, while there are some cards that really use this well, specifically in Cunning, so you've got like Contracted Hunter, you've got things like the Stolen AT Hauler, and that's a legendary, so you're probably not going to pull that, but I think if you get like if you have Kazuda and you pull like 3 Contracted Hunters, then sure, you might want to think about playing him. Let's look at his leader side. So on attack, on his leader side as a ground unit, choose any number of friendly units. They all lose abilities for this round. And then pilot, same thing, just a 3/3 upgrade in the air. So again, like I think potentially strong, but I think it's going to be one of those leaders that's a lot more exciting in Premiere than in Limited. He just isn't going to do a lot for you in a limited sense. The best thing he's got going for him, I think, is that he flips on 4. Which is nice, just to be a little bit more aggressive than a lot of the other leaders in the set. But again, I think it's very unlikely that you're going to end up drawing a card pool that really can take advantage of his ability in sealed or in draft. So for that reason, I think we're going to have to put him all the way at the bottom of B. In fact, I'm going to put him all the way in C. I think he's very exciting, again, in Constructed, where you can really build around him. But in Limited, it's going to be like Piett, right? Where you're going to have very specific requirements to really benefit from that leader, and you're probably not going to see those. And so I think he's going to be one of the leaders you're least likely to run in a Premiere or in a limited format. And so there you go. There are our leaders. There's our tier list, right? We've got Poe and Vader and S. I think if you see these leaders, you're nearly always going to try to find a way to play them because they're so strong. And then in A, we've got Assajj and Luke, good just pinging damage leaders that I think are easy to build around. Rio, again, Saboteur and +1 for 1. Such a strong ability just to get through shields, get through sentinels. Can really take out, your 1 or 2 opponents or your one or two genuinely good defensive options your opponent might have put in their deck. Wedge is cost reduction for pilots, which is strong in this. Ackbar makes tokens, Trench can potentially be a big body on the ground a couple times a game. Rose healing, yeah, sure, whatever. I think it's okay. In fact, let's move. Well, no, I'll leave Rose there. But these leaders, again, more situational. Boba, Rose, Vonreg, you can look at as like, all right, well, this is the best I got. It's not terrible. And then B tier and C tier, I think you're going to really want to avoid running unless you have a very specific card pool. With Piett and Kazuda being leaders that I think it's almost impossible that you're going to find a good card pool to run with. Piett may be a little bit more likely. I could maybe move him to B, but I think I'm going to leave him in C. Otherwise, these, Han, Lando, Thrawn, Holdo, Phasma, you're probably, it's possible you'll find the right pool, but it's unlikely. So there's a tier list. Let me know down below in the comments what you think. Am I crazy? Did I totally get it wrong? Did I totally get it right? And then, of course, let me know what your pre-release results are, too. I'm very curious to see how things go for you. Sadly, I'm going to be going and doing another card game event. I'm casting One Piece Day tournaments this weekend in Dallas, so I will miss my pre-release weekend. It's tragic. I'm not going to have time to do any of them. But at least I've gotten a chance to do a little bit of building on the show with this and a little bit of fun content around it. And maybe I'll be able to find like a late pre-release or something like that the next week and still get to play one. But either way, go out there, have some fun. Jump to Lightspeed is going to be such a cool expansion. And like, subscribe, all that great stuff helps out the channel a lot. Until next time, take care. See you around.